I wanted to talk a little bit about potassium. So this one, again, is tricky because it's so individualized based on your lab values. But I will say in general, a high potassium diet is good for people with PKD unless your blood levels of potassium get high. And generally, blood levels of potassium don't get high until GFR is less than, say, 20 or so. That's when we start to see it more often. Certainly people on dialysis, it tends to be more of an issue. And then maybe people with higher GFRs who are taking certain medications, you start to see it. But in general, most people, assuming you have a GFR greater than 20 or have a transplant, a high potassium diet is good because a high potassium diet it's good for lots of things, but most importantly, perhaps, is beneficial for blood pressure control, which again helps protect your kidneys. So potassium is really very, very specific to you based on your lab values. And so I'm not going to go through, I know if you've ever been told to go on a low potassium diet, you probably have been given a very large list of all these different fruits and vegetables that are, quote, good and, quote, bad to eat. So I'm not going to go there. But I did want to point out that there is potassium in a whole lot more than fruits and vegetables. And sort of like the phosphorus thing, likely the potassium in these types of foods is absorbed a whole lot more and can impact our potassium levels a whole lot more than the potassium in a banana or tomato. Not saying if you need to limit potassium, go eat all the bananas. But I do think it's important to kind of be aware that there is added potassium sort of lurking in lots of these processed foods that we might not even be realizing. So any sort of meat, and specifically processed meats like lunch meat, tend to have these added potassium additives. A lot of sugar-free drinks and actually a lot of low sodium products, unfortunately, have a lot of potassium in them because they tend to add a salty flavor with something called potassium chloride, which has a astonishing amount of potassium in it. So you'll see it in low sodium or low sugar or sugar-free products like Crystal Light, and a lot of just other, I'll call them ultra processed foods. So things like chips and like any of those types of things tend to have a lot of potassium in them. So even more reason to try to stay away from some of these things. I also like to point out, so on the right here, we have all of the sort of quote, high potassium fruits and vegetables that oftentimes people are told not to eat. So banana, tomato, oranges, baked potato is super high. Potatoes are very high in potassium. Cooked spinach, nuts, beans, right? All these things tend to show up on high potassium food lists. But if we look at how much potassium is in meats and other animal proteins, there's quite a bit of potassium in there too. So a lot of times, if people work on trying to keep the meat portions smaller or even swap in some of those plant proteins, that can actually end up helping your potassium too. And then lastly, there's also lots of other things that can impact your blood potassium levels besides how much potassium you eat. If your blood sugar is high, if you have too much acid on board, if you're constipated, if you're not moving your body, certain medications, all of these things can impact potassium levels. And so potassium management is really rather difficult and multifaceted. So definitely work with your dietitian to figure out what might make sense for you.